car parking has always been sort of conceived of on this one person, one car park basis, and we need to break that down, and we need to get away from that. We need to get people into alternative forms of transport. We need to get them on bikes when it's appropriate, walking, catching the bus, as well as parking when that's the right mix, right? And so we thought there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain. Great today to be joined by Toby Littin and Brody Nelson, co-founders at Parkable. Welcome along. How are we doing?
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, hi Paul. Thanks for having us along.
Yeah, look, real privilege. Brody, maybe we can start with you. Where do you fit into this big wide world of tech in New Zealand?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm the CTO at Parkable and co-founder. So started life as a software engineer, and more and more becoming a people manager as I get older and grayer. But obviously love technology, love following emerging technology, and for my sins also do a bit of product management as well.
Fantastic. Oh, well, great to have you here. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on some of the tech news of the week that we'll dive into, as well as some insights on Parkable. And Toby, how about you?
Yeah, hey Paul. I'm Toby. I'm the CEO and other co-founder of Parkable. And for my sins, I think I do things like sweep the floor and empty the rubbish bins and do the dishes because I can't really write code. So.
Love it. All right, well let's jump in. This week has been I think a very important week in tech in New Zealand. Well, in particular in sort of aerospace technology, especially. We had the first New Zealand Aerospace Summit took place on Monday in Christchurch. Absolutely fantastic event. I think for me, getting the opportunity to get down there. Yeah, it was just pretty mind-blowing to have a big sold-out event in the new conference centre there, and really inspiring. We had Peter Beck as one of the keynoters. There was really a broad selection of people from right across that aerospace sector. And yeah, what we heard from Pete was inspiring as usual. They've done just so well with Rocket Lab, but also with some of their acquisitions. They're really positioning themselves to play a really important role within the aerospace sector globally. And in fact, Pete talked about having the Rocket Lab branding and logo on a reasonably high percentage of sort of space launches in one way or another, with their acquisitions and their technology through those acquisitions now being part of so many space launches. I think it might have been as high as 70% that they're now involved in one way or another. So yeah, that was really encouraging. And then just all of the other companies that were represented from Kia Aerospace through with their vehicle, which is going to be able to sit around at I think 36,000 feet and just fly around and take footage and just do something that there's no other craft that's doing that at this point, through to so many others. There were a bunch that got up and did little 5-minute spiels. We had government ministers there talking about investment and funding. And just some really, really good panel discussions. So yeah, I think it certainly leaves me feeling pretty encouraged that this is an area of the broader technology sector that New Zealand has a great opportunity in. I think what I left with was the conclusion that government have to move very, very quickly, and the sector needs to move very, very quickly. Otherwise, we end up losing the position that we're in to other countries. And there does seem to be a lot of competition. There were comments that Australia are already sort of starting to race ahead of us in some areas. So that balance of what the private sector and the public sector can achieve together. I think it's it's really important, and so yeah, hoping that we get the right outcomes there, and they can just keep that pace, which of course, with the New Zealand Space Agency, launching a few years ago, and being one of the few countries in the world to have a space agency, and we beat Australia there by a couple of years. But now I think Australia are kind of very much looking to outdo us, and the Brits are wanting to do more. So it's going to be a very competitive area.
So
But I
so
think very
exciting to see,
exciting.
though, right? Like that we've got a budding space industry in New Zealand, and a few years ago I wouldn't have believed it really. And it's awesome to see that the ecosystem is bigger than Peter Beck and Rocket Lab now. That they've sprouted a whole bunch of other startups around that sort of that initial lead. And I think it's really cool that, well, doing business in New Zealand is often challenging. But in the instance of launching rockets, our isolation is actually an unfair advantage in a way. So that's, I don't know, something we should lean into.
Definitely. Yeah, there was certainly, a fair bit of discussion around some of the regulatory aspects, and some of that was how I guess New Zealand had been able to move quite quickly, and we've been quite agile. I guess the question is that a reflection of how we were in the past, or is that going to be a reflection of how we continue forward? So there's a bit of a strategy review underway. We've got legislation, that covers the high altitude and space area. 2017 legislation, I think that is now. So, and the recommendation have been that should be being reviewed at least every 3 years. So, there is a real need for us to keep moving quickly to I guess to hold on to a position. The size of the sector, I think, what was the number, $1.6 billion highlighted there. So yeah, there's good things, and I think it's an area that will just continue to grow for for quite a few years to come in terms of the global market. It's really down to how well can we do here, and how do we harness that incredible Kiwi ingenuity that we know is there.
You're right, Paul. It's not every industry that has such a close interdependency with government, and it should be our superpower. We're a small country. We're so close to ministers. You can go and grab a coffee from your local coffee shop in the morning and often run into a minister. And we should be playing that to our strength. And I sort of hear once every 3 years for a strategic review. That feels pretty good, but the presence of our space agency early should be our channel into government. These guys should be responding so quickly because the technology and the industry is moving so quickly. It is very easy for any country that comes along later to, by chance, get a jump on us. And that we shouldn't allow that to happen. And I love the story of our space industry and our aerospace industry generally. We've had a number of people kind of budding sort of entrepreneurs and businesses in the space, but it's not until the visionary of kind of Pete and Rocket Lab. He's really lifted it up a level as a country. And now we're seeing not just in aerospace, but all of these spin-outs and industries getting created, and everything from ag tech to more space tech to, you name it, software. And it's so awesome to see. And I think, our government can line up next to Peter and help drive that industry forward. And we'll see more and more and more of that.
Yeah, well, all the best to to the organising committee, and hopefully this will now become a regular event on the calendar for New Zealand, and hopefully we see that sector growth. But yeah, it was great of Mark Rocket and the team to have me down there, and just to see the caliber of contributors that they'd managed to gather together, and just great opportunities ahead, I think. And also there was the chance on their sort of show floor to actually see the technology from the likes of Dawn Aerospace with their space plane, to see one of Whisk's I guess demo craft, their autonomous air taxi. as well. So yeah, just lots of good stuff to see, and great to catch up with a bunch of people and meet some new ones. So yeah, onward and upward is I guess what we're looking for in that part, as we do right across the broader technology sector. Now, one of the other things that's come up, and I guess we've seen this trend for a while, but it's something that's going to impact New Zealand, is what's happening in the social media space. Now, the spin-off published a piece in the last few days around how teens have basically sort of dumped Facebook, and have very very much been attracted to TikTok. And this is somewhat understandable. TikTok's a very addictive platform, but yeah, it probably makes things more complex in many ways, and it also shows us just how it's very very hard with these sorts of things that are very much down to current trends to hold on to a lead. And Facebook looked as though they had this incredibly dominant position. And in the early days of Facebook, having seen what had happened with MySpace, I was just figuring something else would come along and and knock them off pretty quickly. But it didn't. And so I sort of I did ponder. I remember discussing it through a number of media interviews around whether Facebook were going to get knocked off their perch. But it very much looks like that that's exactly what TikTok have done. I guess the complicating factor here, whether it's for advertisers or consumers, is we just see a lot of privacy and cybersecurity concerns around TikTok. Um, Brody, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, that's definitely been my experience, Paul. I'm involved with another business called Sticky Beak, which is a market research company, and we get our respondents through social media. And when we're targeting that youth demographic, it's in the last couple of years, it's become increasingly more expensive to recruit those respondents on Facebook. So it's getting more difficult and more expensive, and on TikTok, the reverse. So when we're going after those that demographic, TikTok is the channel that we use to recruit those folk. So yeah, definitely can back up the Spinoff's article with my experience. In terms of the data security concerns around TikTok, I think those are valid. I read one researcher that said that I don't know if this is still true, but for a while there, that every keystroke, the clipboard was being copied, which from where I'm sitting, there's no valid reason to do that from the application. So that does seem fairly nefarious. And yeah, a few question marks over the security.
Yeah, what are your thoughts, Toby, on this sort of change in trends?
To me, it feels like like you have sort of been wondering what's going to happen after Facebook, and we've seen various social media wars going on, and right down to sort of acquisition of one platform by another person and all this kind of stuff. This to me feels like the latest chapter in the 20-year journey of social media so far, and I sort of, in my seat, I wear a couple of hats, right? One is what's the commercial reality that this now creates? And to Brody's point, it's like, hey, we've got to be multi-channel if we want to fight, if we want to hit this audience. And so there's kind of all those business considerations. But from a just a purely social interest perspective, it's like, far out, I've got teenage kids, right? So I need to keep track of where they hang out online and what they're doing as well. And so it's going to be interesting to see how long TikTok lasts, see how relevant it remains. Is it generational? Is that what we're starting to see emerge across 20 years of social media or more? And therefore, will my kids get on TikTok and stay on TikTok, and then something else will come and displace them? To me, that's kind of the social experiment that we're all going through at the moment. And yeah, so I've got to be a bit careful. Facebook are a great customer and partner of Parkable. So I hope that they continue to do well. But in the next breath, I'm curious, and it's curious, as you said, Paul, to see Facebook be knocked off the perch after quite a long period, right?
I would say that.
Look,
sorry, I was just going to say, I would say they have responded by changing some of their UI UX on Instagram and Facebook to be more video-based content. And I think there's more plans in Instagram to, move even further towards a kind of a TikTok kind of algorithm for displaying short form video. So I think there is a response in the wings. It's just how effective it will be.
Yeah, no, I think you're right there, Brody, and these companies just have to be so sort of agile and willing to adjust and morph and change. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, sometimes it's a reflection of commercial realities and what trends are. I do remember seeing a cartoon or a meme going back quite a few years, sort of joking about Facebook being a CIA experiment. And I think we all sort of laughed at it at the time and thought, yeah, they know a lot about us. Interestingly, there hasn't, I mean, yeah, we haven't seen things like that in joking terms about TikTok. I think there's actually been, probably people a bit more sort of seriously, thinking it through. Those that are maybe abstracted a little bit from an actual TikTok addiction, and there is certainly that concern about, hey, what do governments do with accessing this sort of data? And yeah, there's those questions around, well, i- is the American government maybe a little bit more transparent than the Chinese government on these things, and what would happen in sort of worst case scenarios? But of course,
You
in
know,
some ways, that doesn't really matter to a typical teenage end user who, as an individual, it's very hard to see, well, how much difference does it make for me to be on there as to not be on there? It's a little bit like trying to convince somebody whether they should vote or not if they're kind of super busy on voting day or something. Is like, how much difference does one person make? But then, as a collective, if our whole nation is on a platform, and if the worst case scenario that some researchers sort of suggest in terms of where that data might be getting used sort of lines up, then yeah, could
and
be less than ideal.
sort
But
of two things on that, right? Like one is the fundamental belief system of the governments and the governments where these businesses are domiciled. And in China, you've got a belief system where it's like, I can make your life better by owning and having direct access to your private data, holding aside any nefarious purposes on either side of the fence. You can argue that either way. Whereas in the US, there's this fundamental right to personal privacy, or the West, I should say, not just the US, Europe and the rest. And so you've got this belief system that's different where these businesses live, and that means the regulations that they're operating under are likely to change relative to those belief systems. And so for us, we've got to figure that out. And my worry with yes, it's the teenage demographic, or the younger demographic that's moving to TikTok, and that's where we're seeing the shift take place. Is they may or may not be, I don't pretend to be a behavioral expert, but they may not be more susceptible to influences, right? False messaging, fake news kind of a sport. And is the targeting data that's being harvested by these businesses, can that have a negative consequence that is more profound with the audience that's on TikTok than not on TikTok? And I mean, Facebook, we've seen the outcome of that kind of stuff. And so I'm curious about that, right? We're dealing with our possibly most influenceable demographic at the moment. So that's going to be interesting. But again, a bit of a social experiment, right?
yeah, look, and there's been a lot of criticism, broadly across media, in relation to Meta, Facebook, Instagram. And look, some of that I wholeheartedly agree with. I don't agree with all of it. I think at times maybe we're expecting a little bit much, maybe in terms of what their AI can do and other things. But yeah, doesn't seem as though the media is maybe looking at TikTok under quite the same sort of microscopic detail that they've been looking at Meta. So we will see how these things play out. But it's certainly, It's certainly changing, and it's changing, very much certainly for that younger audience, in the direction of TikTok, and it's just the way it is for now. Probably the one thing that could have put a stop to that was what we saw happening, when Trump was president, and it looked as though the US were going to pull the rug out from under TikTok, and force quite a big change there. That appeared to get quite close with the US deal, and that has happened to a degree in terms of things happening and where data is supposed to be stored and so on. But yeah, I'm not sure if that's the end of it from a privacy discussion. Now, onto other things. iPhone market share in the US, we're seeing reports now that Apple have for the first time reached over 50% of the total US phone sales. Now, I think that there's this is not necessarily uncommon. There are other markets where iPhone seems to dominate, but Android has had just such a big market share. New Zealand's been a country where Android has certainly tended to lead the way. It does tend to tie into I guess the economy of a country and so on, how that's played out. But it does seem as though there's just been this sort of slow tide moving more and more in the Apple direction. Brody, what do you use? Are you an iPhone or an Android person, or have you been in both camps to a degree over time?
I'm firmly in in the iOS camp. I have dabbled with Android over the years, but early in my career, I was a iOS developer, so pretty loyal to the Apple ecosystem. I think what we're seeing is, it's that closed ecosystem versus an open ecosystem playing out. And I think in recent years, unfortunately, Android's become a little bit fragmented in the open ecosystem, with large players pulling in different directions. Whereas in the closed ecosystem of Apple, it's a bit more lined up and strategic. And as a user, you're getting a lot of benefit from the interplay between the different devices. And so, yeah, I think that's what we're seeing, that strategy bearing out.
And Toby, what's your experience? You're an iPhone
No,
user, aren't you?
yeah, trapped in the Apple universe. Can't get out. I love it though. Like Brady, I've been an Apple user since I think or iPhone user since iPhone 1. I'm not right in the Apple universe, but yeah, for me, it like pretty basic, right? Consumer preference. It's you get a really. I love the consistent experience of Apple, and that consistency all the way through from the software and the hardware kind of perspective, and so I imagine that Apple can do that because of this closed ecosystem stuff that Brady was talking about. They can line up the experience, make it a seamless journey to jump between devices, to jump, upgrade devices. It's a very consistent kind of app experience on the devices, and so that makes navigating them easy, and makes change and upgrade easy, and it also makes spending money with them easy. Whereas Android, my experience with Android very limited, but it's inconsistent, and sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. So yeah, that's kind of not surprised, and I wonder how Android's going to respond. Is kind of going to be interesting.
Yeah, look, I tend to, just I guess, part of what I do, I'm always sort of looking at everything that's out there, and so I tend to use a mix. At the moment, my primary handset is the Oppo Find X5, so that's an Android handset. But there's always an iPhone in my pocket at the same time, right? I'm always, trying both technologies, and it's interesting just in some ways how close that they are now in terms of moving from one device to another on Android is as a pretty easy experience, and largely without having to have a special subscription like you tend to with iCloud for storage. There is, because you come down to those much lower price points, there are price points in which you can buy Android handsets that are, yeah, a reasonably average below average experience, I suppose. And maybe that's what it's like on the, if you're on a really old iPhone, but there's just that consistency on the iOS side with operating system updates and security updates that I think is really, certainly from a business perspective, is very, very nice for those that are sort of maintaining and running these things. But I also think from a user perspective, just you've got that consistency that, your iPhone's going to be the same as, anybody else's iPhone, from that software perspective for, usually for at least 5 years, because everyone gets those updates. Unless you are, I guess, tempted to buy a model when you buy your iPhone that isn't the latest model. And Apple, of course, is selling a number of years back. And, similar challenges are there on the Android front, and probably actually a lot larger. So, if today you buy an iPhone 11, and we're on the cusp of the iPhone 14 coming out, then, that may get, let's say it only gets 3 years worth of updates, right? But when I say only, you wouldn't be able to buy an Android handset today that's 3 years old and will probably get 3 years of consistent updates. So yeah, there's quite a lot there. I think Apple are taking advantage of it to grow market share with Mac, with their Mac OS products, and of course on the iPad side, where they've just absolutely dominated from a tablet perspective. That said, there are some quite good Android tablets on the market, depending on on your specific needs. So
Had a
um,
play with the new Samsung Foldable the other day. A friend of mine just got one, the bigger version, and I
yep.
was blown away. It's an amazing handset, yeah, a totally amazing handset. Yeah, it's kind of that real crossover between a handset and a tablet, and when it's folded out, and it's yeah, much better experience than I expected. Enough to potentially convert me over to Android. I loved what I saw so much, and I don't know. We're talking about the hardware more so, but yeah, operating on Android, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because yeah, we probably have seen, it's certainly arguable that we've seen more innovation on the hardware side from the Android vendors, Samsung, Huawei over the years, although, they're obviously, challenged at the moment, Oppo and others. And yeah, that's, I guess, part of the reflection of there being a lot of competition in that space, and a number of vendors, whereas Apple can maybe sit back a little bit and wait for some of these things to, get a little bit more mature, or until they're really willing to bet and go all in on some of the technologies. But yeah, I think, yeah, these days the top hardware on both sides is very, very good, and consistent. Yeah, so interesting times ahead there. I'm certainly curious to see how it'll play out as far as the New Zealand market's concerned, because we do sit in we're quite different to Australia, where iPhone seems to have been a lot more dominant in the New Zealand market, and I think that's just a stronger economy generally for Australia. So yeah, as to whether New Zealand will ultimately follow, but I think we probably are, slowly, is kind of what I'm seeing anyway. Now, on a couple of other topics before we sort of delve into to Parkable, I see a fair bit of attention for Rings of Power, which Amazon have now launched. So it's great to see New Zealand, there on the global stage again. A little bit disappointing that it's only the first season filmed here in New Zealand, but still, I think the pride rises up for us Kiwis with that.
Yeah, it's exciting to see it come out, and it was awesome having the 2,000 odd people working on the show in New Zealand for three or more years. And having watched the first couple of episodes, I thoroughly enjoyed them, and didn't necessarily agree with some of the critical response that we've been seeing.
Yeah, look, it's pretty interesting to see that there's been a bit of mud sort of thrown at the production I saw Elon complaining about I don't know, the representations of the male figures in there, and yeah, there's been a few bits and pieces, but realistically, this is from as far as we're aware, the biggest budget that's been thrown into a TV series in history, and for that first season, it's been spent in New Zealand, so very pleasing, and so for it to break records for Amazon Prime viewing, I guess, is to be expected. And yeah, I hope the whole season overall works out quite well, and that we get a little bit of a sort of spin off in terms of tourism back to New Zealand, because we probably need a little bit of that now. So,
Absolutely. I do think that even in season 2, my understanding is that all of the footage has been taken for the scenery and so forth. So I think even though it's not filmed here, a lot of the setting will still be largely looking like New Zealand. So that's a good thing.
oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. And Toby, your thoughts on this? Are you going to be having a watch
I will
soon?
definitely watch it. I love any escape from reality I can find. I haven't found the time to watch it yet, but I've got to say, before I do watch it, I've been a little bit terrified about a whole like Tolkien cinematic universe, and worried it might. I was a bit of a Lord of the Rings fan, and then enjoyed The Hobbit, and now I'm like, oh man, I hope they don't cheapen it to the point where there's I hope the essence of it isn't lost with this whole cinematic universe thing. And I was kind of happy to hear in the press release that came out about this earlier this week that they're going to put it over 50, maximum 50 hours and 5 seasons. And I sort of thought, well, that's all right. It's not this never-ending universe. But then I immediately sort of thought back to NZ Inc. And I was like, oh well, actually, if they've already filmed all of that, maybe we could do with a cinematic universe, and they can just pick up the next round and back down here. That'd be awesome. So, but yeah, excited about watching it, and can't get enough of dragons. I suppose it goes for everyone, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and I opened up the just the Amazon, the standard Amazon app, not Amazon Prime video app, and it was basically a full screen, ad comes up if you open their app, or it did, yeah, it did the other day, and then once you got past that, you were sort of had to scroll a long way to get past anything to do with it. So they're definitely wanting to get some real mileage out of this. So I certainly hope it works out well for them. And then the other topic that caught my attention was that there's an Oxford quantum physicist who's been, I guess, tearing into the quantum computing industry recently, and saying that that quantum computing is effectively sort of that it's getting overhyped, and there's much more hype than substance, which I thought was interesting. I mean, we do have all sorts of trends that tend to come through in the technology world, where something is on the cusp of happening, and I guess we've seen that with aspects of blockchain. Been another one where there's a lot of money's gone into it in one way or another, and quantum computing certainly has attracted massive investments, but we're not quite there yet. I mean, it's very hard to know unless you're, deeply involved in a particular world, like, quantum computing, and are a, expert researcher, to really understand exactly, where we're at, how close are we, I guess, probably similar to sort of autonomous driving, technology, and other aspects of, um, advanced technologies. Any thoughts
Mm.
on this? Is this just the norm? There's always
Yeah,
going to be the naysayers, and
I,
maybe we're
I,
not far off.
yeah, I think so. I think it's fairly typical of a deep tech R&D category. There's a lot of hype initially, and then things are harder and take longer than anticipated. And then we're sort of into the trough of disillusionment. And eventually, if the projects stay focused and the spend is still there, we'll start to see some business applications come through. But for me, quantum computing is still a long way away, and it's right at the start of that sort of hype cycle.
Yeah, and it's always these things from my perspective they're always a rising tide, not like just suddenly stepping through a door and you're in the light, right? Like it's a rising tide. There's so much R&D going in, and we're seeing things like as a result of research in quantum computing, you're seeing semiconductor chip sizes decrease over time. And what does that mean? It means a smaller handset, but you don't recognize it as wow, here's quantum computing. You've just got, to our earlier topic, you've just got a slightly better Android phone or a slightly better Apple phone, but the R&D is incremental. It's not this eureka, here's suddenly a world changing thing, and the outcome might be there in 20 or 30 years that it is totally world changing and we're doing amazing things, but it won't be stepping into that overnight. And I love that it's always, I'm a huge believer in science, but I also laugh that often it's the scientists that are the strongest naysayers in this trough of disillusionment, to take Brody's expression, in that sort of Gartner hype cycle. And they're the ones who, going back through the ages, right, Copernicus and so forth and so on, and it's always those ones that are like, no, the science is rubbish and it's a waste of time, and it's like, it's never a binary outcome. It's never a binary outcome where it's off or on. It's always an evolution over time, and sometimes the evolution takes a bit longer. It's always harder. But I'm loving that the money's going into R&D. I'm loving that the investment's going into quantum computing, because it means we get way more cool gadgets to play with and way more stuff at the consumer end that I love tinkering with as a user, right? So.
Yep. No, I think there is more than likely that there will be a point where this is just stuff we're taking for granted. But there's that journey to get there. So we just
And
have to
it,
keep going.
it can kind of sneak up on you as well. Like, I think AI was definitely in that, or is in that category of overhyped, taking longer. But I don't know if you guys have caught up with some of the sort of almost general intelligence text to image algorithms out there, like DALI 2 and Mid Journey and all these kind of algorithms. They're just mind blowing to me. And yes, there's no real application to those yet, but that seems like a huge step forward in that space, and it's so cool to see it. And it's, for me, that's just snuck up overnight, and all of a sudden you can type a very elaborate message and get a photorealistic image rendered in a few seconds. So be excited to see where that goes.
No, I mean, you're 100% right, Brody. And when I'm sort of doing public speaking, sort of focusing on futurist type topics, and trying to encourage businesses to be more forward looking, one of the comparisons I give to how we can be with technology, because we don't necessarily notice those changes from one day to the next. We can miss out on these really big changes that happen over time, because they just sort of sneak up. And as you say, then you turn around one day and it's like, oh wow, there's a really big change, but it's actually been coming for a long time, or it's been there to a degree, but then you notice the particular aspects of that. And of course, for those organizations that aren't keeping a watch, then they can easily lose their lunch. And I guess that brings us to Parkable and the Parkable story, where
Don't lose your lunch.
well, you're in an area that it's disruptive, right? And we're in a world where new technology can completely disrupt old players, and there are so many examples from over the years where old players have sort of sat on their hands and thought that they'll be just fine. Yeah, so let's delve into Parkable now. After I think Joe Allen sent an email across mentioning what the parking options were around our office, there was a good little prod from you, Toby, that we should be sending guests details of Parkable parking options around our office. So I fired up the app, and I had thought I'd used it in the past, but I couldn't see a sign in. So I created a new account, and sure enough, I was able to see part of our parking building was allocated to Parkable. One of the buildings virtually next door with some parking space was accessible by Parkable. And I looked across the road on my own street, and there was a private resident who was offering their driveway or the garage or whatever it was for parking. So you guys are pretty much everywhere, certainly, locally for parking. But maybe you can just sort of, roll back and give us a little bit of an overview. And we're probably not going to have time today to hear the full Parkable story, but it'd be great to hear a little bit about where you're at. And, we might have to revisit at some stage in the future to go a bit deeper.
Yeah, easy. I can do the 30-second history. So we started life about 6.5 years ago with Parkable at an All Blacks match at Eden Park here in Auckland, where we're sitting now. And we launched on this premise of people who had a spare parking space could list it on an app, and other people could find it and park their car in it. And it was a wonderful, wonderful, fun business. We launched an All Blacks match. The All Blacks won. We had all our friends and family out helping us to get people to download the app and, signing up driveways and doing all this kind of stuff. And it was great fun. But about a year into that journey, we realized that we weren't quite having the impact we wanted to have. So we think that parking is broken. We think it's broken for a handful of reasons, but principally it's bad experience for drivers. It's bad for people in the car. And as we think about an autonomous vehicle future, we're thinking about how can we drive this experience layer up. We think it's bad for business because people are building and constructing more car parks than they need. They're operationally complex. There's a lot of money invested in it. And it's bad for the environment because people are circling the block looking for car parks. Their legacy car parking structures aren't conceiving of future energy vehicles, so electric vehicles and things like that. So the infrastructure is not there. And it's bad for the environment because car parking has always been sort of conceived of on this one person, one car park basis. And we need to break that down, and we need to get away from that. We need to get people into alternative forms of transport. We need to get them on bikes when it's appropriate, walking, catching the bus, as well as parking when that's the right mix, right? And so we thought there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. And so we've built, or Brody and his team have built an amazing software layer that takes a lot of those problem statements and rolls them into a solution for businesses to operate their parking assets and their mobility assets on a single software platform. So that's kind of what we do now. What you see in Auckland, what you described before about having those pins on a map, we really only do that in New Zealand by virtue of that history I talked about. But elsewhere in the world now, we sell it. We sell software as a service to some of the biggest employers in the world to help their employees come and go from the office every day or in a hybrid work environment when they're coming to the office, know if they should drive or not. And the largest property owners in the world manage their parking estates so that they don't need to build as many. They can do things like put in EV chargers and manage EV fleet and generally provide a better tenant experience around it. So that's kind of what we're doing now. And we're so stoked, I suppose, to put it bluntly, to be growing that business from here in New Zealand, and to be, we feel like we're on that disruption journey. It's definitely a journey. It's not a open the door thing like we talked about before. But we're on that journey of rethinking workplace mobility and rethinking how the car parks under a workplace should operate and what role do they have as an amenity to the tenants or the workers in the building, the employees in the building, and how can we make that an awesome experience, a better business outcome, and a better environmental outcome. So that's what we're doing now.
It's a long 30 seconds, Toby.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, look, it's pretty exciting. Yeah, I'm curious where that bit fit into the picture, because you also acquired an Australian company they were doing something sort of similar with that more traditional car parking replacement. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And it's still part of the mix, right? Like it's still,
Yeah.
at its core, it's real estate optimization. And that still holds true. And so we did acquire a business in Australia. It's gone really well for us. Our Australian business is growing really, really strongly. We're seeing hybrid work and the shift to electric vehicles is really two very strong macro trends that mean managing mobility is complex. Everyone goes to work on a Wednesday or a Friday for drinks. They don't go to work on a Monday, and they won't go to work on Friday if there's no drinks. So it's like, how do you manage a static real estate asset in that dynamic kind of environment?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and even more so in a COVID type world where our habits have changed in terms of where we work in a huge way. Brody, how hard is it to sort of build the technology? How's that journey been? I think sometimes startup will sort of start in one direction, and then you get to a point where you have to kind of scrap a lot of what you've done and kind of start again and rebuild or take big turns. How's that played out with Parkable? What are the sort of challenges that you've encountered along the way?
Well, it's funny you should say that, Paul, because we've actually done it perfectly from day zero and have made no mistakes. So it has been a lot like that. As Toby mentioned, we started life as a two-sided marketplace, and we built that. In more recent years, we've moved towards car parking management solution for employee car parking and tenant parking, and managing those large portfolios and large real estate owners. And I think that comes with a lot of challenges, right? Like there's a lot of different ANPR cameras out there and software, lots of different security systems and building management systems. So trying to make that all work globally from New Zealand is not without its challenges. And we're now not just a software company. We have to interact with the real world in different regions globally. So yeah, it's definitely keeping me busy, but I love the mix between traditional software development, IoT, hardware, EV charging stations, all this kind of stuff. So we're not short of challenges ahead of us, particularly on our scale journey.
Yeah, well, it's good to be challenged. Now, you recently won Meta as a customer that was announced. Walk us through that a little bit of what sort of difference does it make to an organization of that scale having access to Parkable's technology compared to how they were operating prior, and how far through things are you with them?
Meta obviously transformative for a business like ours for a handful of reasons. The commercial opportunity is amazing, like obviously goes without saying almost. But for us, it just means at a global scale, they help us bridge a credibility gap. And so, having Meta as a customer and doing a global, in the journey of a global deployment with them, every other large logo, every other large customer just sort of says, oh, well, if Meta have chosen you, you must be reliable and you must be credible and you must be good. So that helps. In terms of the category that we're playing into and sort of the difference before and after for Meta and for our customers, many of them aren't aware that a solution like ours exists. And so we sort of joke, they manage their current setup with spreadsheets plus human pain and suffering. And so they create an awful large amount of human pain and suffering, which we try and take away with the work that Brody and the team are doing. Yeah, that's kind of the before and after, right? We get rid of the spreadsheets, we get rid of the human pain and suffering, we get rid of some of the real bad experiences that go on in these places and drive for efficiency and a better experience, a better environmental outcome.
Yeah, I guess if I could just add, one of the cool things about Meta is they have obviously very large campuses and complex environments, complex use cases. So from a product perspective, it's everything, So it's all of our future booking functionality, it's our tandem parking functionality, it's our visitor parking functionality, it's sort of ANPR, and it all came together. And the roadmap is long, and they've got a long wish list as well. So it's exciting to be solving these complex problems for one of the biggest technology companies in the world.
And a funny thing, Paul, just on Meta, and it's kind of a always keep your eyes open experience. But Meta reached out to us identifying that they wanted a solution in our space. And the first time they reached out, we thought it was spam because we never thought that a company like Meta would reach out to a little old New Zealand business. So we ignored it promptly for a couple of weeks before they sort of hit us again and were like, hey, maybe you guys want to reply to our email. Anyway, so we laugh about that.
That's pretty funny. Well, I'm glad that that one's worked out in the right direction. And so, in a situation like theirs, obviously, there's probably so many aspects where the technology, can apply and can help. What's probably the biggest sort of standout, at the moment in terms of where you're at on that journey? Like, is it a scenario where your technology is in play and is saving them in terms of whether it's investing in new car parks or what have you? Is there one particular area you can highlight?
Yeah, the key benefit that they're getting is improved employee experience and employee engagement. So these big organizations, they really care about how their employees are feeling. They're in a talent war, and employees around the world, like workers around the world, car parking is a big source of complaints, and it's really emotional. I came to work and someone was in my park. I didn't have a park at work today, but the boss's park is empty. Oh, I never get a car park. I've got to drop the kids off at school, and it's never equitable the way they're distributed through these orgs. And so they put in Parkable, and immediately the employees are like, car parking's awesome. It's really fair. It's transparent. It solves all of the problems that you might reasonably expect to encounter in a day-to-day commute from a car park. And so employee engagement and employee experience is kind of the key benefit.
Yeah, and if I could just add, I guess one of the challenges a lot of organizations are facing is that return to work post-COVID, encouraging employees to come back. And as Toby mentioned, managing the real estate is much more dynamic now, and it's almost like you need a tool to manage that, a level of, dynamic interactions between lots of different people.
Yeah, and just to last part of the question is, we're globally deploying through Meta's offices. So we are live with them. That's a long journey.
Yeah. That's exciting. And in New Zealand, are you seeing much interest at this sort of level as well for larger organisations? Because think of those that do have a lot of employees, and I mean these same challenges apply here as well,
Yeah,
right?
totally. And it's not just the large ones. We've got a lot of small and medium organisations as well. They might have 10 team members and only 2 car parks, and so it's right down to that kind of scale. But yeah, absolutely. The businesses that care about their employee experience and have car parks, they're the ones that we help. And so here in New Zealand, we've got some great customers. At the big end of town, from Datacom and BNZ and KPMG and others, right down to, as I say, your sort of small and medium customers who we love the most, because often they get a direct emotional kind of benefit. We love hearing from them. So.
Car parks are a pretty expensive, commodity, right? So, I can see that. Yeah, that could be really relevant from small to large organisations. So, might have to have a quiet chat to you afterwards around how we can try out your tech. So, yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, I'm hoping we'll get a chance to sit down in person. Apologies, I've come down with something today, so and the sneezing has just started mid podcast. Hopefully, I've managed to mute most of that. But look, it's really exciting to connect. So thank you very much, Toby Littin and Brody Nelson, for contributing today, and great to hear where things are going with Parkable. It sounds like a really exciting journey ahead. And I'm just thinking of the addressable market globally. It's pretty insane. So really exciting. Anything else that either of you wanted to add in before we finish up?
Not from me. Just thanks for having us. It's been a great chat.
Yeah, ditto. Thanks for having us, Paul. Good to chat.
Absolute pleasure. Well, big thank you to our show partners: 2 Degrees, Vodafone, Spark, HP, Gorilla Technology, Cyclone, and Aruba. Certainly their support of the New Zealand Tech Podcast and of the broader technology and innovation ecosystems here in New Zealand makes a difference. So thanks to them, and thanks everyone for listening in. If you're listening to the audio this week and you've missed out on the video, just a heads up, if you follow us across whatever social media that you use, whether it's LinkedIn, where we will often pop up with live videos, probably most weeks, if you follow me there, or our NZ Tech Podcast channels across Twitter and YouTube. And of course, if you're watching the video, then make sure you're subscribed via podcast audio app, as that tends to be the easiest way to listen in while you're commuting or exercising or what have you. Thanks again, everyone. We'll see you again next week. All right. Cheers.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.